Hi, everybody. How's it going today? Welcome to the campus of Central Washington University on the first floor, Discovery Hall. This is my office, and my name is Nick Zentner. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Are we 5 by 5? We're 5 by 5. I love that. Thank you. The local time is 11:46 p.m. Whoa. The local time is 11:46 a.m., a few minutes before noon, and live viewers are pouring in, and they're all saying 5 by 5, and I'm so grateful to see that. That's a relief. Many of you are watching this in replay, and you can go ahead and fast forward, I guess, about 13 minutes, and I'll put a little bookmark at the beginning of the program for the replay viewers. But for those that are live, and looks like even though this is our first session, we have how many watching? 300 and climbing here, so terrific. A special welcome to those of you who are brand new and have never joined us live before. So, where are you viewing from? Let's say hi to a bunch of you. Looks like we're working okay, and we'll begin this program in a little bit more than 10 minutes. Hello, Switzerland and Calgary and Washougal and Sweden and Perthshire, Scotland, and Medina, Ohio, and Lexington, South Carolina. Scrolling way too fast now. Kamloops, BC, San Diego, Austin, Texas, St. Louis, Missouri, Bergen City, Norway, Auckland, New Zealand, hello Adele, the Netherlands, Northwoods, South Wales, Tennessee. This is just a flood of good stuff here. Brno, Czech Republic, or something like that. Kent, Washington, Portugal, Lookout Mountain, glacier area of Cle Elum, Washington, Spokane, Bangor, Maine, Selwood, Oregon, Gentry, Arkansas, Cheney, Washington, Statesboro, Georgia. I'm still alive here. Costa Rica, Lake Ozark, starting to get emotional, trying to keep it together. Borlänge, Sweden, Worcester, UK, Swansea, Brisbane, Australia. Have I got one? Garrett, the Dutch Night Owl from the Netherlands. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Philomath, Oregon. Kirk from Philomath. Mugs galore. Here's to all of you for joining us. I'll save most of what I want to say until we start at the top of the hour, but I think I want to just continue to visit with people here. Anacortes, Washington, sunny Tucson, lots of nearby people. That's true. That's a cup. That's also true. Jönköping, Sweden, possibly that's correct. We're up to 400 viewers. Black Diamond, Washington, Waldport, Oregon, Purcell, Oklahoma, Angola, New York, North Bavaria, Clarkston, Washington, the Methow Valley of Washington, Washington, D.C., Murrumbeena, Victoria, Australia, I believe, Cologne, Germany, Red Rock, New Mexico, Portland, Oregon. If you're watching the replay and you're like, what, is this some sort of weird roll call, geography B? No, we're going to start the program in 10 minutes. I guess you're new to us and not quite sure what's going on. It's okay. Scrub ahead 10 minutes. But we're still live with people checking in from where they are viewing. And there's a whole new arrangement here in my office, of course. And I'll give you the backstory on why we're in my office and so on. Forest Grove, Oregon, Troy, Michigan. Pat from Yakima. Hi, Pat from Yakima. Pat from Yakima. Pat from Yakima. Thank you. Seattle, Washington, Boulder, Colorado, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, New Madrid, Missouri, Southern Oregon. Plenty of talk about Pat from Yakima. That goes back a few years. spring of 2020. Billings, Montana. Saber's in Billings, Montana. Saber, you're still on the road? Is that true? That is incredible. Göteborg, Sweden. That's Kirk. Lenora, Washington. Mora, Minnesota. Yeah, it's 10 minutes to the top of the hour, so that means students are changing buildings for their next class. Although we do not have class here in the United States tomorrow. Most schools do not for Veterans Day, so I'm surprised we have anybody still around. Most people have attended class this morning and they're on their way home for a 3-day weekend, I guess, but what do I know? Ritzville, Washington, Bellingham, Washington. I guess since we're still, can I just test? Yes, 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 that's all working. Great. Omak, Washington. I like the door open. We'll just, unless I regret it for some reason, we'll just keep the door open. Gives you something to look at in case you get bored. I like the you probably can't even hear it, but I like the sounds of happy people, mostly, walking around in the hallway, and you should get a glimpse of what it's like to be here, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to, oh God, there's Bryce the Rock Licker. I told him I was doing this with my door open. He said he would photobomb, and he just did. Okay. Okay, wonderful. It looks like everything's working just right. That's terrific. Let's visit for a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to go get my head right. There's no hot mic. So in a few minutes, I'm going to just go out into the hall, I guess, and mutter to myself, but you won't be able to hear me this winter. Toledo, Ohio. Hello, Miami. I almost want to scroll back and catch every last location, but I guess I'll just see it in the replay. Oh, Peter, the physics technician, just can't get enough of going back and forth. Excellent. Yeah, there's some changes. You'll miss the hot mic. You'll miss the chalkboards. We'll address that. We'll try to embrace what's new this winter. There's hopefully a combination of new things and old things from, if you are a veteran of the past winter live streams. Missing Bijou the cat, etc. He says hello, everybody. Lac de Flambeau, Wisconsin. Portland, Oregon. Winnipeg, Canada. Colorado. Kennewick, Washington. Gresham, Oregon. Dayton, Ohio. 600 people now, or thereabouts. 541, excuse me. Trent says hot mic was my favorite part. Okay, well, you want me to like mutter to myself sitting here? That would be kind of like, I don't know. Got to defeat the purpose, I guess. New Zealand, hello. I'm going to try. Geest, the Netherlands. Hello, Hans. Very sorry about that. Fairbanks, Alaska. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Columbia, Missouri. Mesa, Arizona. Kamloops, BC. Nina, hello, is in San Diego, probably. The Dalles, Oregon. East Wenatchee. Bellingham, Washington. Texas Hill Country. North Franconia Volcanic Mountains. I don't know where that is. I'd like to learn where that is. Davis, California. Patrick's in school, hopefully. Chelmsford, England. Northwest Oregon Forest. I'm just soaking this in, man. I'm just soaking this in. It feels great to have so many of you here. The swamps of Louisiana, Ridgefield, Washington. Sometimes I get antsy before I do this, and I'm like, why do I even bother doing this? I'm all nervous and everything. I'm walking around the building, muttering to myself. This is why I'm doing it. It just feels great to have you all here. Matt, like magic. Wow. Falls City, Washington. North Bavaria, Germany. Thank you. San Clemente, California. Rogue Valley, Oregon. I just can't believe you're all here. It shouldn't be a surprise, but it's been 9 months. Anchorage, Alaska. Lakewood, Washington. Exclamation point. Hi, Mike. Maribor, Slovenia. Hello, Christian. Vinman's Bakery. You've got to love it. This episode of Nick from the Office brought to you by Vinman's Bakery in beautiful downtown Ellensburg. Hello, Jeff. I was in there an hour ago. Didn't see Jeff, though. He's getting his computer warmed up at home, probably. Issaquah, Washington. Aaron McConaughey's mom in Shoreline, Washington. Hello. Met you last spring, I think. Erie, Pennsylvania. Marion, Virginia. Okanagan Falls. Great to be back. I agree. Great to be back. Great to be back. Okay, I've got about 4 minutes before we're going to start, according to my watch. I couldn't find the little Timex white clock that I used to hold up, which was a staple from the backyard. Can't find that thing, so we might just have to go wristwatch instead. Thank you for joining us. It appears that we're functional, so I'm not going to worry about the technology, and I'm going to go take a walk around the building, and I'll be back in 4 minutes to start our show. Thank you for joining us. Here's to you for joining us. And here's to your health. Why not? Here's to your health. 634 watching. Hello, Oscar. And I hope more come in. And I just genuinely hope that this is a positive experience for you, not only today, but if you want to stick around for all 26 of these episodes. Okay. See you in a couple minutes. Hot mic, not really. Well, a pleasant good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this first session. This is session A, entitled The Missoula Floods Story. And I'm going to tell you the Missoula Floods story, relatively fast-paced, I think, with a bunch of slides that I have queued up. It's a visual story. It's part of the reason that this Ice Age floods thing is so captivating to many. It's the visuals, it's the places, and the landscapes are so fresh that it's easy to visualize some of this stuff. But I'm pausing because in addition to telling you that fast-paced Missoula flood story, which is the conventional story that's been told by me many, many times, and others many, many times in different formats, I also want to set the tone for this series and what this is and what I'm hoping to do with you. And it's not for you, it's with you. This is a community. And so I'm going to pause right now and look at the live chat and ask, are you brand new to us? Is this your first time live with us? I'd like to just see if we have anybody in that category. And even if we don't, well, whatever, I don't know. Maybe I won't wait around for so long, but let us know if you're brand new to us and you've never been a part of this alphabet series before. We don't need the no's, but we need the yeses. Yeah. So, right. So a bunch of you. So yes, I'm seeing plenty of yeses. And so I just want to make sure this is not a private club. This is not some sort of thing where you have to subscribe. You have to pay money to be part of this. This is not something behind closed doors. And we only allow certain people to get into our world. This has been a long time complaint that I have with colleges in general, libraries, all sorts of things. I guess I understand to a degree why things just can't be totally open to everybody for free. But in this case, that's what we're doing here. And I'm saying we, not me. And so I am saying to you, if you are brand new to us, I'm glad you found us. Maybe you're new to the channel within the last 2 weeks. Maybe you're new to me and the YouTube channel in the last 6 months. I don't know. But if you are new, welcome. You belong here. Everybody belongs here. And I hope that you can get the flavor of what we're doing today. So you're hearing what I'm saying. There's also people here who have been definitely into this content, this geology stuff at this YouTube channel, and have been eating up everything that's been put out there, whether it's live streams in the past or videos that I've done in the field. And this YouTube channel started in March of 2020. And it has blossomed and grown, and the number of subscribers has continued. But again, it's all free. There's no entrance requirements for this. So I mention this because there's a variety of people watching right now. And of course, that's just the live crowd. Then there's also the people who watch the replay of this. So get to the point. Here's the point. I have some general plans and goals for this winter's alphabet series, but I don't know exactly how we're going to do it. I only know the first couple of letters. And that's what first thing I want to say. So here's the major message. I'm doing these alphabet series, these live stream series, these A to Z series, these 26 episodes that fit a theme and work together because I want to learn new things. You can think of it as a selfish thing. I want to learn new things. And so this is not Ice Age Floods A to Z, where I basically teach you all the stuff that I've learned about the Ice Age floods for 26 episodes. That does not appeal to me because I want to break new ground. I want to learn a bunch of new things with you and learn from you and learn from people who watch these and then send me stuff by email and learn from geologists who heard third hand what was going on and they watch and then they send me a bunch of stuff. We learn together. It's not just a cliche, that's real. And that's what's been going on this is the fourth A to Z series. So today, session A, and Sunday morning at 9 a.m., which is session B with a guest, Jerome Lessman. It's solo today, no guest today. Jerome Lessman will be with us on Sunday morning. Those are our two table setting episodes. And that's a phrase I used 4 years ago when I was learning the exotic terrains. We had 6 table setting episodes before we dove in and started eating the meal. Well, I think we need 2 table setting episodes. And the first table setting episode, this one, is running through this conventional story, laying everything out the way that I understand it. And on Sunday, Jerome and I will be wondering which parts of the conventional Missoula flood story need a reexamination or might have some scientific papers or some narratives that are typically not addressed very carefully. And I think I'm feeling like I want to say something real right here. I'm a teacher. I don't do research. There is nothing here where I'm going to be trying to discredit somebody or I'm trying to change the Missoula flood story where I say that work is not worth thinking about anymore. This is instead what needs to happen. That's not what I'm doing at all. Starting with show C. I'm looking to add to the Ice Age floods story by looking into narratives that are new to me and possibly new to almost all of us. So I'm adding, not subtracting from the Missoula flood story, from the Ice Age flood story. That's my intention. I want to add a third dimension, a fourth dimension, a fifth dimension. What? I don't know what I'm talking about at the moment. But there's enough things that have puzzled me. And I'm like, if I ever had time to really sit down and learn some of this stuff that I've always been meaning to look into, where things don't just sit totally right with the Missoula flood story to me, then I want to do it. Well, here we are. We got till mid-February to do it. So are you hearing me? I want to learn new things. I want to add to what we know about the Ice Age floods. And quite often, we're going to add to what we know by going back to papers and journals that were written 100 years ago by J. Harlan Bretz. And we'll just see what we find. I have no doubt we're going to learn all sorts of cool stuff together. I have no idea. But I know the first 2 episodes are setting the table before we get into the new stuff. So even if you're gung-ho and been reading on your own and watching all the videos this summer that I've been doing and other things, I'm so glad that you're into it. And hopefully you'll get something out of today and our visit with Jerome on Sunday. But I'm really just trying to get everybody on the same page, essentially, including the brand new people. Also, it's just fun to be here with you. It's positive. I almost broke down 15 minutes ago. It continues to be an unbelievable thing. Okay, so what are the 2 things I'm doing? Telling you the Missoula flood story, and I'm also giving you, did you just see that? Did a bunch of balloons go by? What happened there? Did you see the balloons or am I hallucinating? Okay, I have no idea what that was or who set the balloons off. Or I said some magic word and they went off. I'll have to watch the replay. Okay. Wow, crazy. Oh, where was I? Yeah, so if you are brand new to the Ice Age floods, not only new to us, but new to the Ice Age floods, and you're watching in Croatia or wherever in the world, I'm going to put some of this on you, if you don't mind, because what I'm saying is I'm not teaching you 26 basic episodes of the Ice Age floods, and I hope you're not crushed by that message. Maybe that's why you tuned in today. You're ready to get the Missoula flood story in 26 bite-sized versions or whatever. I just said that I want to learn new stuff, so therefore I assume you'll have some of the basics of the Missoula flood story to this point. So how can you do that? He goes to the overhead camera. And to me, this is the book that started getting this geology into everyone's homes. And this is a book that is maybe on some of your library shelves at home. Cataclysms on the Columbia, written by John Allen, Marjorie Burns with Sam Sargent. And I think the date, there's J. Harlan Bretz. I think the publishing date on this is, 1986. So to me, and you can correct me, But to me, this is the first book. Okay, I mean, like what we're doing here is popular geology. Some of the people in academia don't understand what this is, but they'll just go, oh yeah, you're just kind of popularizing our work. And I guess I am. I don't know. I'm just trying to make it accessible to all in this form. And that includes reading science papers and everything else. But to me, maybe this is the start of popularizing geology. This is before the internet, obviously, 1986. I know the roadside geology books started at the University of Montana by Alton Hinman. Maybe it was starting about the same time. But before that, I can't think of major publications. I can't think of major publications that were into a lot of people's homes in the 70s and in the 60s. You can correct me if you were living through that time. But this feels like a new chapter of public awareness and public appreciation for geology. And this is the book, in my opinion, that started it all. Now, you might have this, which is a second edition of the book. There's a little glare here, isn't there? And those two lead authors teamed with Scott Burns from Portland State University for this second edition. Date is 2009, sure. And so by now we have websites, we have the internet, but there's still wonderful work. And I think this second edition of Cataclysms on the Columbia involves some photos that were not in the first one. Okay, so my point is, what I'm trying to do here is give you some ideas for resources to teach yourself some of this story, because I guess you were just told that I'm not giving you 26 episodes teaching you the basics. I think you can still follow along with what we're doing, but this is the place to go to get some of the story. Let's keep the pace going, boy. Yeah, I didn't plan on that glare. This thing came out more recently. John Sonicson lives in Spokane. Do you have this book? This is Bretz's Flood, the remarkable story of a rebel geologist and the world's greatest flood. And John published this book also, 2008, 2009. And this is more specific on Bretz's life itself. And I've said this before in a number of occasions, but I'll say it again. It's this book, Bretz's Flood, that got me re-engaged with the Ice Age floods. So I thank John for writing that book. And I read it on a plane heading somewhere overseas with Liz, I forget, Mexico or something, like 2018 or something. I'm like, okay, there's stuff here about Bretz I didn't know. And I can identify a little bit more with Bretz based on the way that John wrote that book. So this is a more personalized version of the story involving the history of J. Harlan Bretz and the work. If you're still looking for books, many of you know about these books, but I strongly recommend them. This is Bruce Bjornstad, a geologist in the Tri-Cities of Washington, writing a On the Trail of the Ice Age Floods book. You can see how well I've used my book over the years. And this is not a narrative book, but this is a trail guide, and it's a driving guide, and it's a flying guide, and it's got all sorts of detail in it that is rich. And then that was a successful enough book that Bruce teamed up with his former advisor at Eastern Washington University, Gene Keever. They wrote a second book on the trail of the Ice Age floods, The Northern Reaches, and a little bit thicker book, same format generally, lots of good stuff in there to play along with. So that's another way to teach yourself the Missoula Floods Story. And then, of course, there's many books, this from Mountain Press, and this is one of the original authors of the Roadside Geology series, Glacial Lake Missoula and its Humongous Floods. Okay, so that's maybe how you have taught. If you know a bunch of stuff about the Missoula Floods, maybe that's one source where you've gotten your information. Great. But maybe there's a different way that you learn about the Missoula floods. Maybe you went to this website right here, and this is called hugefloods.com, and it's got chock full of photographs and video clips and some text And there's many multiple subpages within this hugefloods.com. Here's the Brett story. I was like, who took these photos and who did the website? And why hasn't it been updated in a few years? Lake Lewis. Stevo Minsky's art included here. Okay, so it's story time real quick. And then we'll go to the slides for the title of today's episode, The Missoula Floods. So the guy who put that website together, his name is Tom Foster. And Tom Foster grew up in Ellensburg. And Tom Foster learned about me by watching his television in Ellensburg in 2006. So allow me a personal story. So in the mid-2000s, the university here, Central Washington University, wanted to publicize what's going on campus to the valley, to the county, essentially. And this is 2005. So they're like, okay, everybody's got cable TV. We're going to start a cable television channel called KCWU TV, Channel 15 locally. And people are, scrolling through back in the day when everybody's watching the chain programs, basically. And people are coming through and they see this geology program. Because I was asked by people at the university here if I was interested in making a geology program. And I'm like, sure, but I think I have some time. My kids are teenagers. They don't want to hang out with me anymore. So I've got some extra time. And I think people might be interested, but I don't know what I'm going to do. And they're like, well, why don't you just start doing like an interview show? We have a TV studio in Bullion Hall, and we have the students learning how to be news anchors and stuff. Why don't you just interview some geologists? So we called the show Central Rocks, and I started interviewing basically people that I worked with in the geology building. And 30-minute interviews, and they're kind of dry, and I'm stumbling around. I don't really know what's up. They're still on the internet. But the reason I mention that is they started to get broadcast every Thursday night at whatever. And one of the emails I got pretty quickly after that was from Tom Foster, who lived in town. We'd never met. And Tom said, I think I like geology, and I've been starting to teach myself the Ice Age floods. This is 2006. And he said, let me show you a few photos that I've taken. And in his email are photos like this and photos like this. Here's Teresa Foster, his wife. And I'm like, and this one, he definitely sent me this by email. And I'm like, who the hell is this guy? How can he take photos like this? I don't even know this person, but he's got photography talent. And he keeps sending me these amazing photos. And Tom Foster said, how about we start an Ellensburg chapter of the Ice Age Floods Institute, and you could do public lectures on campus. And I think maybe people would come and want to learn about the Ice Age floods. So it's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. Most of what I learned about the Missoula floods between 2006 and 2015 was because of my collaboration with this guy, Tom Foster, who never took a geology class. He was a plant manager for Twin City Foods. And he eventually got a promotion and went down to Pasco and still worked for Twin City Foods. But every weekend, Tom and I were out there making programs. And I was learning all sorts of stuff from him directly. And Tom was going out with Bruce Bjornstad and others. And then I was interviewing geologists and bringing them to Ellensburg and getting them give public talks, and people started attending these talks. And then I started going around to Ice Age flood chapters. And again, this is before YouTube and stuff, at least with me. So I'm like driving into town, giving a talk to, 35 people in the room, and then driving home. So my point is, there's a lot out there for you to learn the Missoula floods, and much of it's coming from me. It's coming from this huge floods thing, because you'll notice that every once in a while, let me go back to the homepage. Let me go back to the homepage. There's videos, and that's Tom. we got to the point where I bought a video camera and he taught himself how to do video, and we started making 2-minute geology and these other things. So it's not like I just taught myself how to do the Missoula floods because I was teaching all sorts of classes on the floods. That's not true. And it's not like I was part of some collaboration or consortium with a bunch of Ice Age floods geologists to be, totally in the academic world. That's not true either. I was hanging out with this guy who processes frozen peas and frozen corn, like harvest time, and then they bag them up and send them to grocery stores around the country. So Tom Foster is behind most of my interest in and my programs to date about the Missoula floods. The slideshow I'm about to show you is from the most recent downtown lecture that I did on the Ice Age floods. It was a lecture called Dating the Ice Age Floods. Of course, that prompted people to put comments that are kind of jokes in the comments down below. And that was 5 years ago. And that's really the last time I did a major program on the Missoula floods or the Ice Age floods, because I felt like there wasn't a whole lot more new that I could put together for a new lecture. But here we are. So since 2018, I've gotten enough clues from geologists that I've been dealing with, and from some of you by email and everything else, talking with people in person. I realize there are some angles to look into where we can add to the Ice Age flood story. And Tom passed away unexpectedly in March of 2020, so he's not here to collaborate with anymore, but his family is keeping hugefloods.com rolling. I think I want to go back and show you one more source, and then we'll get on with my little slideshow. Do I have this bookmarked? I do. There's another creative way to learn about the Missoula floods. This is put together by a very talented guy by the name of Daniel Coe. Daniel Coe works for the Washington Geological Survey over in Olympia. And I did a video with Daniel Coe. I drove over a couple of years ago, I think, and followed him around and looked over his shoulder. He's an amazingly talented guy. And I think he put this together during the pandemic. But it's a very interactive site that's kind of fun to navigate. Here's J. Harlan Bretz zooming into your photo in front of Palouse Canyon. And you just kind of keep scrolling through Dry Falls. He's got little maps that are animated if you just kind of hold on. Again, I'm going to march you through this story in just a second, I promise. But I think my point is there's many ways to get your teeth into this Missoula flood story. It's not just finding a book in the library anymore or buying a book at a visitor center. There's lots of different ways to get into this story, and I'll give you one more way. If you go to nickzentner.com and you click on this panel right here, I go all the way back to the stuff with Tom. So some of the 2-minute geology things are here, the little blue shirt with the red bow tie. But there's a lot of other stuff here as well. All of this is Ice Age floods, much of it back when I was collaborating regularly with Tom. But now that I say that, I think that's wrong, because a bunch of these are things that I've been doing this summer. So getting to this, or getting to a playlist on my YouTube channel called Ice Age Floods or whatever, or Ice Age Geology or something like that. There's multiple ways to do this. Okay. So I think I've done what I wanted to do there. The main message is there's no shortage of video, website, and books to teach yourself the basics of this story. And I guess if you want to be a model student, an ideal student, you dust off a couple of those books and do some reading in the next couple of weeks to kind of feel like you're up to speed with some of us who've been thinking about this flood stuff for a long time. But again, I mean, come on, man. Nothing's required. There's no final exam. So if you don't want to do any of that reading or watch any of those videos or go to any of those websites, that's fine too. You're still welcome here. Come on, man. You're still welcome. Welcome here. I'm seeing the word buffering. Are we okay? Can I pause just a second? And that'll give me a chance to get my slideshow ready anyway. Are we doing okay? Thank you. Okay. So this is my goal for the next 25 minutes, let's say. You can time me. Next 25 minutes. I've grabbed most of the slides from the Dating the Ice Age Floods talk that I gave in downtown Ellensburg 5 years ago. And I want to just go through the story. This is maybe what you thought we would do from the start, but I felt like I wanted to set the tone properly. We got almost 1,000 here. Right. Wonderful. Okay. But I got to tell you before I launch into this, and it's going to be hopefully fast paced and I'll keep your attention. I don't know. I need to like bite on some leather or something. I don't know. Like when I tell this story, my urge is going to be to say, I kind of wonder about that. Oh, there's kind of an angle there that could be fleshed out. That's next time. We're saving that for Sunday. You know what I mean? Session B, I don't know what I'm going to call it. Something like open questions, or are we sure? Or I don't know. I'll try to come up with the right title for Sunday morning show at 9 a.m. Pacific. But I just want to tell this Missoula Floods story without stopping and going, I'm not sure. That's maybe we have some new angles on fleshing that part out. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to give you the straight Missoula Floods story. Are we clear on that? Okay. The Missoula Floods story. Let's do it. Oh, we're going full screen. Are you kidding me? We're going full screen. Dating the Ice Age Floods. We live in Washington, and I'm broadcasting live to you right now from the middle of the state of Washington, Ellensburg. Spokane is over here. Seattle's over here. These red things are interstate freeways. You can drive from Ellensburg to Seattle in 2 hours. You can drive from Ellensburg to Spokane in 3 hours. Back during the Ice Age, which is younger than 3 million years ago, there was an ice blanket over much of Canada. The Laurentide ice sheet covering the plains, more or less, and the Cordilleran ice sheet, which was filling mountain valleys and overtopping mountain valleys quite regularly. Washington is down here. So Washington was definitely under some ice at least once. I'm mostly going to be in the little circle in the lower right, but you might see some little smirks or whatever, because if you've been watching with us this summer, you know the new narratives I've been working on. Maybe I'll call it that, new narratives. Yeah, maybe I will. Maybe that's nice and positive. Maybe Sunday will be new narratives or new thoughts. Maybe new thoughts. So I'm assuming for some of you, you haven't been with us since last winter. Let's say you're just an A to Z person. You haven't checked in at all since then. And you haven't seen the field videos and other things I've been doing from April through now. That's fine. I'm starting from scratch and trying to get as many of you into the main scene as possible. Thank you. Okay. So yes, I'm in my little bubble. So Kevin Pogue from Whitman, Washington gives us this beautiful simplified map. Blue is the ice sheet. Orange is an area called the Channeled Scablands, where these Ice Age floods or these Missoula floods did some serious carving. And here's the source of the water, Glacial Lake, Missoula. It's the Missoula Flood Story, is it not, that we're talking about today? So if it's a Missoula Flood Story, it has to come from Missoula, Montana. That's the Missoula story. The bedrock of Eastern Washington is unique. It's not that unique to have floods of Ice Age water, but it is unique to have those cataclysmic floods flowing over basalt bedrock, because the basalt bedrock is stacked one on top of another. This is the German chocolate cake from 16 million years ago. And many of these lava flows are heavily fractured just from cooling 16 million years ago. And so if this was a different kind of a bedrock, this is Interstate 90 climbing beyond Vantage, heading towards Moses Lake. If it was a different kind of bedrock, we wouldn't have the landscapes that we do today. Each of those individual lavas came out of a fissure-style eruption. And we might have a letter just talking about the actual lavas themselves. Maybe that's a place to start. But keep to the Missoula Flood story, boy, talking to myself. So this was novel to get some video from 2014. There's plenty of more recent fissure-style video coming from Iceland in the last 2-3 years. I guess I should update this. This is a bit dark, but I kind of like it. From the USGS, I do believe, and they're showing one individual batch of mafic magma coming to the surface, and we're flooding the Pacific Northwest with lava, not with water. Again, this is 16 million years ago, basalt lava. So in Hawaii today, this is Tom Foster and I flying over to Hawaii. We were really into it, man. So this is, just kind of a naked surface with no vegetation, a very fresh lava. We can visualize that for Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon after each one of these basaltic lavas. That's right, Deborah, Big Black Boring Rock. That's another book you can get. So here's this German chocolate cake that's 3 miles thick in the middle, and it tapers to almost nothing on the margins. And you can see up here on the top, these are the channels that were carved by the Missoula floods coming from Missoula, Montana. More shots of the lava. I don't know why. Oh, yeah, I know why. So it's not flat lava that these Missoula floods came over, because the German chocolate cake, or the Columbia River Basalt Group, was heavily faulted and folded before the Ice Age. And so ridges like these between Ellensburg and Yakima and continuing over into Eastern Washington were definitely a thing during the floods. Let me show you. Here's an animation showing some Missoula floodwater, and look at how Saddle Mountains and Frenchman Hills and other ridges, Horseheaven Hills, are deflecting the floodwater. So we have to get things in order, and that is a common thing. That's a common thing from past alphabets as well. It's common for almost all of us to toss these concepts into a blender and not realize that there's millions of years from one thing to the next. And that's going to be a struggle for us. I guess that's the right word. That's going to be a struggle for us this winter as well. If we're talking about the lavas, again, that's 16 million years before the ice. And more to the point, I think this will be a point of emphasis soon. I don't know which letter it'll be. We have lakes, freshwater lakes in Eastern Washington, and some of those lakes are 16 million years old. And some of those lakes are 15,000 years old. And some of those lakes are maybe 1 million years old. So even the lakes, we have to realize there's many different generations of lake water, and it's easy to get them confused. I was just in the barber shop yesterday. No big deal, humble brag. Northwest Barbers, Jaime Gutierrez, best barber in town. And there was a guy in the chair before me, and he's like, "Hey, geology." I'm like, "Hey, how's it going? You Pat?" "Yeah." He says, "Oh, you've been up at the pocket lately. Those logs, those petrified logs are up there." And then he starts talking about the floods. He knows about the Missoula floods. He knows about the petrified logs. He's just taking the water of the floods and taking the water of the pillow zones of the lavas and assuming it's happening at the same time. And, I didn't feel like going into a 20-minute discussion. So it's easy. It's common to do that, to mistakenly mix up distinctly different chapters. So we'll try our best to play that game the best we can. Okay, well, now we are clearly in the Pleistocene, which is younger than 3 million years. And today we still have some of that ice. So it's not like the ice is totally gone. And it's not like this is 16 million years old. Of course, there is rapid retreat of this ice sheet, but it is technically still with us. So here's our map of the ice sheet during the Missoula Floods Story. And here's a map, if you know the geography of central Washington. Ellensburg, again, red is Interstate 90. Here's Moses Lake. Get on State Route 17, drive up to the lower Grand Coulee, get to Dry Falls, say hi to David, the ranger, and then you can get yourself to a moraine that marks the southern edge of this ice sheet. This is the famous Winthrop, this is the famous, Withrow moraine. Wow, senior moment. At Lake Chelan as well. So everything under in white was underneath the ice sheet. Are there multiple generations of moraines? I guess, but the Missoula flood story really just talks about one moraine. And north of that moraine, this is drone photography near Chelan, these giant milk duds were moved by the ice sheet and dropped by the ice sheet. These are not Canadian rocks necessarily, but this is one trademark of a portion of Washington that were under ice. Now, I pick my words carefully, right? I think you know why. We spent a whole winter on this. Tom Foster with a drone. Jaeger Rock, a couple miles east of Mansfield. A glacial erratic, and glacial till sits beneath that erratic. Another ground shot, Tom Foster, Jaeger Rock. Loess, wind-blown silt, that's part of the Missoula Floods story. This healthy accumulation of wind-blown silt, according to the Missoula Floods traditional story, was all there before the Missoula Floods. And that's what Bretz was seeing with his papers and with his maps. You go to these rolling hills near Washtenaw, Washington. You stop along a state route illegally, and then you park on the shoulder, and then you start looking at the details of this loess, this windblown silt. And occasionally, if the light is right, you can actually find some ash that fell out of the sky from an erupting volcano. Now, which volcano made that ash? It's been carefully analyzed chemically and age-wise, and believe it or not, in Washtenaw, Washington, within the loess, there is ash that's from a huge volcanic explosion up by Mount Baker, or at Mount Baker, the Colshan caldera, 1.1 million years ago, according to this paper by King back in 2016. And so a bunch of this loess is extremely old. And the Missoula Floods story says, all this loess is here. You can't hold it. I can't hold it. I can't just tell the story. Tell the story, boy. So we visualize a place like this with beautiful, graceful Palouse hills, and we say the floods never got there. The Missoula Floods never touched that area. And we don't think the ice sheet touched that area either. Now, back a few years, we had a buddy, Tom, a different Tom, who lives in Spokane, and this is before we invested in drones. So Tom, who worked in the medical industry as a hobbyist, would fly his trike over portions of Eastern Washington, and he was very generous with his time and expense. He said, I'll fly over whatever you guys want me to fly over, and I'll film it. So he's stirring up some deer here in some of the Palouse Hills over by Pullman, Washington. And that was as close as we got to nice oblique aerial shots before we invested in some drone technology. So the traditional Missoula flood story, and the way that I've taught it for years, is this is 16 million years ago. This is list that came in before the Missoula floods, just to say that. And so let's go ahead and form our glacial lake Missoula. And why are we forming that lake? It's because this ice dam here gets established in northern Idaho, and it plugs the outlet for the Clark Fork River. And therefore, during the time that this ice sheet is here, we form a glacial lake Missoula. And the conventional story is we're going to flood this lake more than 40 times, up to 89 times. Some see 100 or more separate floods of glacial lake Missoula. You know what I'm doing today? I'm telling the Missoula flood story. And so each of those big floods where we break through the ice dam and we scour the landscape and have that water drain all the way to the ocean is one draining of one glacial lake Missoula. And if we're talking about 100 Missoula floods, we're talking about resealing this ice dam and reforming a glacial lake Missoula each time to repeat the process. Different ways to portray this. Tom Foster, going over and taking still photos in the Lake Missoula area. There's shorelines from glacial lake Missoula. This is the highest point. There's been some beautiful interpretive signs placed above the campus of University of Montana. And each of these strand lines or shorelines of glacial lake Missoula today are still controversial. Very difficult to understand how many lakes we're talking about. Save those open questions for another day, boy. The floor of the Mission Valley, I think this is the Mission Valley, I'm not even sure. well, I guess I have it here, Mission Valley seed potatoes grown in the sediment on the floor of Glacial Lake Missoula. Famous photo by Tom Foster of the famous giant current ripples on the floor of Glacial Lake Missoula. Is Tom Foster the first to see these? Of course not. This was work done 100 years ago, and we'll get into all the old-timey geologists who did the original work and how those papers have aged over the years. Other shots of the same thing. Listen, if you're we doing okay? Like not only technology-wise, but are you very well versed in this Missoula flood story? This is just a pep talk for you. If this is all review for you, I got a pep talk for you. Every one of these episodes, A to Z, is not going to be a review. I'm reminding you what we're doing. We're trying to include everybody with the most basic, familiar Missoula flood story. And on Sunday, I'm not going to say we're going to blow holes in it, but we're going to wonder if we can find some new thoughts to investigate in a positive way. Let's keep going back with the story, boy. Good. Hope this is working for you, especially for those new. This is probably too much for you and too quickly for you, but again, this is my choice to try to get everybody on the same page. How am I doing on time? What did I say? 25 minutes? Whatever. So here's precisely where this ice dam, this Purcell Trench ice dam, this portion of the ice sheet was located. Maybe you're familiar with Lake Pend Oreille or Sandpoint, Idaho. And so here's the backed up Glacial Lake Missoula water, and Tom Foster's making this. He does everything. Tom made this beautiful, like changing the water to brown because we're picking up a bunch of sediment. And so this flood probably turns from beautiful crystal clear water to chocolate milk as it picks up loose. There we go, high energy flood water. I think this is Oregon Public Broadcasting. I'm sorry if it's not. From an old TV program at this point. I'm just grabbing stuff to use in my classroom. There's Wallula Gap, the choke point for all this flood water coming from Montana. Here's the water draining down into the Willamette Valley of Oregon because there's another choke point here downstream of Portland. I got to play this again, and I promise I'm going to be well behaved, but please notice what they do with Moses Coulee here. Going north? These should all be credited properly. They're not. I apologize. I'm an instructor. I teach. I just grab what I can and use it in my classes. So I've showed this a million times. I think this may be from some British program. Probably have it illegally. This is a nice little potential scenario for what the ice dam looked like. And then potentially what the ice dam looked like when it broke up. Are we really breaking up an ice dam 100 times? According to the Missoula flood story, we are. Okay, well now let's just release this Missoula flood water and let's have the entire state of Washington swallowed up by this water. I always crack up when I see this. But I like this. It's kind of an bird's eye view of this flood. Oh yeah, here we go. So they did a nice job here. And of course, one then thinks about what are the actual dates of these floods and did we have humans living in the path of some of these floods? And that's still an open question. The yellow star is Dry Falls. The red star is Ellensburg. And now we're talking about dams, time in hours since we break the ice dam. I'll show this to you a couple of times. And the colors are depth of water. So here we have Lake Lewis. Here we have Glacial Lake Missoula. And so we're forming lakes at different times. So we're about to break the ice dam. So this is the ice sheet here over the Okanagan Waterville Plateau, for instance. And so red is deep water. So here's Glacial Lake Missoula about ready to burst through the ice dam. It says it's already 1 hour since the ice dam burst. I don't know what to tell you. And here's the Columbia River Valley over by the Sandpoil and the Upper Grand Coulee. And again, this water is going to be released. It's going to be energetic and carving, and then it's going to get stopped in its tracks down here at Wallula Gap because it needs to wait its turn to thread through Wallula Gap. So we're going to have this second and temporary, much more temporary ice age lake, Lake Lewis. And there's usually a gasp in the room when I show this to 19-year-olds, and they don't exactly gasp that often, but they're this stunned that this is happening so quickly. This is like 24 hours since the ice dam broke, but that's what we're talking about. This idea of catastrophic is on the scale that we can visualize, that we can think about. All right, I don't think we need all this. Detailed margins of the ice sheet. Yellow star is Dry Falls. So Dry Falls is a place that is heavily visited by the most casual travelers. Most do not have an interest in geology at all. They're just looking for a bathroom, a clean restroom, and maybe an ice cream cone. But they're suckered into this cliff, and then they read a couple of panels, and then they go, holy cow, this used to be like Niagara Falls, I guess, huh? Honey, get out of the car. We got to tell the kids about this. And that's the conversation that's been going on for almost 100 years. We're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of the opening of Dry Falls State Park. That's going to be part of our history lessons this winter. And that old visitor center, that old Vista House, is still standing, built in 1928, I do believe. So, yeah, I mean, you can stand in your little cage, eat your ice cream cone, and thinking about geology maybe for the first and only time in your life. And you visualize a Niagara Falls. And it's an American dream. You don't have to hike at all. You can use the restroom, eat an ice cream cone, and never walk with beyond 100 yards of your vehicle. Maybe you can keep it idling. Well, here's Tabbert, the guy who flies trikes. I'm not even sure he got a permit for this. This is back in the wild and woolly days of probably 2009 or something. And Tom is flying north, and he's approaching the lip of Dry Falls. And look at those giant potholes, those giant holes that are now in private land. But a nice opportunity for us to see right here. We were just flying right over these horseshoe-shaped cliffs. This is the Dry Falls plexus, as it's known. A number of falls. This is the Sunset Highway, Bing Crosby coming through in 1925. After the floods, we're left with these incredible coulees carved quickly by the Missoula Floods. And again, a great place to teach geology. This is Carl Loquist, one of the guys that I've been doing the local field trips with forever and ever, spurred on by Tom Foster. Okay, so it's always bugged me that people would visit the state park and they would only visualize this. And there were truly paintings that said, hey man, Dry Falls used to look like this. But I did enough learning from Tom Foster and others, Bjornstad's books and others, Bretz's original work, that I realized that we needed to possibly change people's perspective. I don't know how many people we've changed, but I had a budget for a PBS program. And so I went down, found these guys. Chris Smart actually connected me with these guys down in Portland. And they are CGI people. I don't even know the right term for them, but they created water to get away from the Niagara Falls tranquil waterfall scene where you honeymoon. And instead, we made these. So this is real drone photography by Chris Smart, who I used to work with. He's now retired at CWU. And this is Ray's from Portland, Ray's water that he's bringing in through the magic of his computer. So the whole goal was to give a more accurate view of the cataclysm of what one of the Missoula floods possibly looked like. And I think we were being conservative here. We could easily have thickness of water that was truly 350 feet thick, going over a 350-foot high cliff. But these are the original files that were polished up down in Portland and we used in a couple of video programs. This might be new to some of you, but it was fun to collaborate with the drone guy, Chris, and the computer people in Portland to try to create something a little bit more quote unquote accurate. This is just looking at one flood though. So there's a common reaction to this video, maybe in the live chat right now, like, well, how about the floods before this one? You wouldn't have had that cliff if you didn't have floods before. That's so true, but we just had money for one flood, man. We're just trying to get off of this Niagara Falls tranquil scene. This one's particularly popular because this is a real RV driving down the road, and then Ray put in the water behind him. Yeah, that turned out pretty well. Yeah, look at it coming right down the road. That's nice. Okay. So thanks to Chris Smart, who still lives just down the street, but living happily in retirement now. He's the guy that I made all the Nick on the Rocks programs with as well, but that's not part of our topic today. I want to keep it moving. Photos from Tom Foster. That's Tom sitting there doing a selfie, essentially. The size of these potholes. This is a big pickup truck, a blue truck, and you can see that these are 50-foot deep, 50-foot wide holes that are drilled into the bedrock. What in the world? So you can take your pick on which. I don't know what part of this Missoula flood story resonates the most with you. I think it's different for every person. Some people say, wow, look at the size of those coulees. Like, that was carved so quickly. I'm blown away. Some go, look at the Dry Falls thing. How do you make a cliff that high? And it's a waterfall. Some say, look at those potholes. Some say, look at these slackwater sediments, which we're about to look at. So I think there's all sorts of places and angles that kind of bring people into this story. It's not just one thing that everybody looks at. Man, the giant current ripples maybe does it for you. Oh, we got almost 1,200 people. Nice. Now a Tom Foster photo. Jim Wark, it says, beneath my head. I think he donated this photo to Tom. This is Potholes Coulee looking east up into the Quincy Basin. And we have typically twin horseshoe-shaped cataracts. And Frenchman Coulee is also twin horseshoe-shaped cataracts. According to the conventional Missoula flood story, all of these features are created by a series of floods from Glacial Lake Missoula in Montana. Historic shots from the UW archive in the Palouse Falls area. Wonderful Model Ts or whatever those cars are. You know cars better than I do. So yes, these black areas are where there was intense scouring by highly energetic Missoula floodwater. There's other places that were under standing water at times. And so the Missoula flood story, that's what we're doing today. The Missoula flood story says there's often a daisy chain effect, that there's a standing Glacial Lake Columbia, there's a standing Glacial Lake Missoula off the frame. And when you release Missoula water, it dumps into the Columbia water, and the Columbia water sloshes up and over and creates these floods coming over these areas. More animations, probably Oregon Public Broadcasting, oblique kind of interesting shot looking at the Columbia River Gorge between the Washington Cascades and the Oregon Cascades. And because of this choke point, the fresh water is being ponded up as far south as Eugene, Oregon, before all this water finally gets out to the Pacific Ocean. Celilo Falls, an important Native American fishing site, was a direct result of the carving by the Missoula floods. In the Columbia Gorge, if you know what you're looking at, this is, I think, looking on the Oregon side up at Moody Road. I think that ranch is on Moody Road. You can see the high water mark. In other words, you can see where the scour ravaged the lower walls of the Columbia River Gorge downstream of Biggs Junction, essentially, all the way down to Portland. But the uppermost portion of the walls of the Columbia Gorge are unaffected. Vista House in the Columbia Gorge and Beacon Rock, totally underwater. Of course, this wasn't here at the time, but totally underwater during some of the floods. And for fun, I just went on Google Maps and, like, if I just drove straight from Sand Point, where the ice dam was, and I drove straight to Astoria at the mouth of the Columbia River, how long would it take me, according to Google Maps? A little bit more than 8 hours. This is the kind of travel time we're talking about for some of these floods, I think, but don't quote. There's another angle here. Maybe you're drawn to the floods because you know there's places in southern Washington that have these repetitive beds, these chalky beds. Is that here? No. So is this part of the story, these slack water sediment layers? Yes, because if we pick up a bunch of the loess, what happens to it? If we carve and take a bunch of this loess away by Missoula floodwater, is that loess going to get swept all the way to the ocean? Because in some places, the loess is just sitting there innocently on top of the basalt bedrock. Innocent loess on top of the basalt bedrock. Other places, you can see the innocent loess. I've never really said that phrase, but I like it because I've said it 3 times now. The innocent loess, minding its own business, is sitting on top of the basalt bedrock, but look at all the loess that's gone, that was swept away in the Cheney-Palouse track. Tabert, flying. This place untouched. There are the loess hills. The loess has been innocent and unremoved. But the hills that were here have been swept away. What happened to that loess, that windblown silt? What happened to all this brown that no longer has brown? So this is a map from Vantage, Washington, to Moses Lake, to Ritzville, to Spokane. And these white areas are where the basalt is right at the surface. The overlying loess has been swept away. So one view is all that loess got carried all the way to the Pacific Ocean. There must be a hell of a lot of dumped loess out in the Pacific. Well, that may very well be true, but there are places where the water slowed down. We're getting there. Here's loess, that innocent loess that survived, but all of its brothers and sisters swept away by the floods. Tom Foster photo. Between Ritzville and Esquire Ranch, incredible islands of loess that managed to survive. But the real stunner is all of the loess that has been removed by the Missoula floods. Aerial shot by National Geographic. Who took the National Geographic photographer out there to show them the best places? Tom Foster. Here's this guy from Ellensburg. There's so many angles on why sharing this story is way more effective now than it was even 20 years ago. And again, I use Tom Foster as an example. Never took a geology class, taught himself the Ice Age floods by reading Bruce Bjornstad's book and hiking with Bruce and a couple of other people, and then making a website. And suddenly National Geographic is contacting Tom because of his website. It's just a guy sitting in his kitchen or his living room every night after work. That's inspiring. And if you're an academic and you're like, hold on, this sounds dangerous to me. We need certified people. We need certified people who have been trained properly to be the leading authorities on the geology that's being covered. Well, National Geographic. The loess didn't make it to the Pacific Ocean, not all of it. And there are places in the extreme southern Washington where that loess that was picked up got redeposited when the floodwaters stopped. And here's one of the most famous places, private land, where you can see these flood sediments. And Richard Waite studied these Burlingame slackwater sediments very carefully almost 50 years ago, and counted 40 layers, and he attributed each layer to a separate Missoula flood. And this is from that last lecture, remember, 5 years ago, when I was just doing my best to take all these scraps of things that we knew about the timing of the Missoula floods and tried to somehow correlate them regionally. Obviously, very professionally with Sharpie markers. Obviously, I'm not certified if I'm using frickin' Sharpie marking colors. Notice my dates here. This is 5 years ago. I've got all of the Missoula flood action between 19,000 calendar years ago and 13,000 calendar years ago. And I'm doing my best to take all of this work in the last 50 years and take slackwater sediments at Zillah, Washington, Burlingame, where we're just going to go back in a second, Lewiston, the Sandpoil, where Brian Atwater did his work back in 1986, Lake Roosevelt, 9 Mile, Michelle Hansen doing some work in Montana, and Larry Smith and others. and trying to correlate. I wanted to just see, were these beds the same as these beds as this? It's still a question, but stay on task today, boy. Somehow we got a hold of this Washington Wine Commission drone photography, which was done, again, this is over private land, so they got permission somehow from the landowner. But it's some of the best drone photography that I know of the famous Burlingame sedimentary layers. What are these things? They're deposits from the Missoula floods. And the conventional story, can I get rid of this bar? Shit. And the answer is no. Try not to be distracted like I am. These are incredible beds, slack water sediments made out of fine loess. And the interpretation is these are Lake Lewis deposits. And each batch of loess brought in with almost scary regularity, right? Why are these beds so perfect? Why is every thickness about the same? Why aren't there buried soils and all sorts of... stop. We scored with that photography. I can't remember who gave it to us, but they did a nice job. So that was Burlingame. And if you go over to Zilla, which is south of Yakima in the Yakima Valley, so again, you can find these slackwater sediments in many places. And my question has always been, are they the same beds in every spot? Well, here's one way to keep track of not only the time, how far back in time we are, but if we can find that same ash couplet in each of these places, then we can correlate between beds. And that's kind of done. This is near Benton City, Washington. This is right on a public road, like a mile from the busy gas station at Benton City, where Interstate 82 comes ripping through. And I've led field trips out there with folks, back in the day. So the most accurate dating of this two ash fall to beds from Mount St. Helens is 16,300 years before present, calendar years. So you've got some Missoula flooding before, down by my watch. You've got some Missoula flooding after. Slackwater sediments at White Bluffs. I want to wrap it up here. It's after 1. And I'm coming to you, although I don't know what we're going to do with live Q&A. Here's me with 2 bad knees, but you can see the thickness of some of these beds. Like, it's not a minor thing. These beds are, multiple feet thick and quite photogenic. So we were just, I don't know where we were. White Bluffs, I guess it's not on this thing. To me, this is one of the most stunning places. Lewiston. And Foster and I met down there, way over here now. We're in Idaho, for goodness sake. This is just north of Hell's Canyon. And we filmed just for a couple of hours at this outcrop, but it was maybe the most dramatic and pleasing place that I've ever seen, which is right next to that state park. What's the state park there? Hellgate, is it? Or something Gate or Hell, whatever, outside of, just south of Lewiston, Idaho. And each of these is a separate Missoula flood slackwater sediment. So we have a Lake Lewis making that one, and then we wait, I don't know how long, and we make another Lake Lewis sediment. And the conventional Missoula flood stories, each of these is a separate Missoula flood. You're like, okay, I guess that's cool, but whatever. Well, there's something I'm standing on, and I think I have that as well. Yeah, this is again right next to I think this face still exists. Maybe somebody from Lewiston knows if this face is still there. This is Foster taking this photo and stamping this on. So there is a single gargantuan flood from Utah, the Bonneville flood that came down the Snake River in southern Idaho through Sean Wilsey country and came down the Hell's Canyon and didn't make fragile slackwater sediments. It brought in these big-ass boulders from Hell's Canyon. And here's the path. Here's Lake Bonneville, breach Lake Bonneville over Red Rock Pass, Pocatello, Twin Falls, and then get this water all the way to Tri-Cities, basically, but we are right here with these photographs, just looking at the Bonneville, and you're like, wait a minute, why were we at Lewiston just a second ago with Missoula beds? And the answer is Lake Lewis was so large during some of the Missoula floods, and Lake Lewis, remember, is just a backup of the Missoula water, that water slowly backed up all the way to frickin' Lewiston, Idaho, a bunch of times, not just once, according to the classic Missoula Floods story. So here's the high energy water coming down the Snake River Canyon in southern Idaho, Evel Knievel country. Here's the famous place for some of us, the Melon Gravels of southern Idaho. And this sign has been there forever, perhaps new to you, southern Idaho. Those giant boulders that were polished beautifully by the Bonneville flood water are still sitting there 18,000 years later. But we're back to the video, and I'm purposely not including audio on this. This is a little bit dark, I guess. No, it's okay for you. So those Missoula beds were here, but look at these things that got flushed in here with high energy water from the Bonneville. So if we know the date of the Bonneville flood, which as far as I know is 18,000 years ago, calendar years ago, then we have some Missoula floods that are younger than the Bonneville. This is one way to keep track of time. Yeah, here's Tom. Nice job, Tom. Oh, yeah. Holding my questions until Sunday. Glacial Lake Columbia, I don't know. Yeah, we'll quickly go through this. Brian Atwater did some famous work in the mid-1980s, about the time that Cataclysms on the Columbia was being published for the first time. And he was studying in the Sandpoil Arm upstream of Grand Coulee Dam, where there was quiet water, and some of those delicate lake beds were preserved because high energy floods apparently did not come down through all of the Sandpoil Arm, like there's scraps of things left on the margins. And so these old black and white beds, photos of these beds were meticulously mapped and described by Brian Atwater, down to the point where he's got a flood bed, and then he's counting what he interprets and most people interpret as annual varves. So they have like tree rings in the mud to count years before the next flood event. So nobody before Atwater, as far as I can tell, could actually go to a place and get down to this storytelling where you can actually figure out how many years we're talking about, where we're basically filling Glacial Lake Missoula on the other side of the state line. And then we release that Missoula water again, assuming that all the water is coming from Montana. Okay, I think you get it by now. Michelle Hansen, unfortunately, I don't think Michelle's working any longer on the Missoula floods, but she and Larry Hansen and John Clegg were very, very active with looking at delicate beds on the floor of Glacial Lake Columbia as well as Glacial Lake Missoula, and continuing to add to our precise knowledge with all of these varved sediments and sediment beds and tephras, ash fall deposits that fell into the lake or into dry areas. So this is most of my energy for that 2018 Dating the Ice Age Floods lecture. And again, I'm sharing these slides directly from that session. And I was just trying my best to correlate between places. And I was disappointed that I couldn't quite get to where I wanted to go. This is Tom Foster here. Latah beds near Spokane. Also near Spokane, the Latah beds. I think beyond that golf course there. And I still don't get these bad. These shouldn't even be in this Missoula Floods program, I don't think, because I saw these for the first one and only time I saw these were in some quarry near Spokane Airport. It's mostly sand, I guess, with big ripped up. I don't know what this stuff is. I don't get it. Shouldn't really be in this program. I'm just trying to tell the Missoula Flood story. This is Mike McCollum. Lord. I think it's Mike McCollum talking to David Gaylord. And this was a GSA field trip in 2016 when I first met Jerome Lessman. But this might be a really key spot, but not in today's program. Not in today's program. God, I still don't get those. What is that? What is that quarry telling us at airway heights? Stay on task, boy. Back to Glacial Lake Missoula. Why? Oh, just a little bit of history. So this is a little touch on Joseph Pardee in 1910 and the 9-mile section right along Interstate 90, and some young work done on the age of the tephras that have been figured out, putting us clearly younger than 20,000 years ago. Blue boy here, yeah, making a Glacial Lake Missoula program. The last video that I did with Tom Foster, which had more questions than answers, really. Okay, I think we get the point. This is all younger than 25,000 years ago. Some final photos from Foster. Maybe this is what draws you in. Maybe this is the only reason you're interested in the Ice Age floods. Huge boulders out in the middle of nowhere. This one also gets a reaction from any crowd that I show the photo to. I've told that to Tom a number of times. You're like, hey, pop quiz for you, Tom. Which photo of yours gets the most reaction? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, the one out in the middle of the vineyard right next to the freeway outside of Pasco. It's like, oh, really? That one? I'm like, yeah, I don't know why, but people love that photograph. Up on top of Steamboat Rock. These are erratics, many of them interpreted as erratics floated in on icebergs carried by Missoula floodwater. Icebergs, ice rafted erratics. Some of them tumbled down the floors. There's Grand Coulee Dam, everybody. Why is that photo in here? I don't know. Stevo Miski, an artist who lives at the foot of Mount Hood. Visited him once a few years ago, right before the pandemic. Wonderful fellow. Did some painting, watercolor painting, or whatever you call these beautiful illustrations. This is his portrayal of what Vantage, Washington looked like during the Missoula floods. That's a photo by Tom Foster. This is a giant boulder near Mattawa, Washington. Now we have surface exposure dates, also younger than 25,000 years old. Now we're kind of scattered, so I'm going to wrap this up. Yeah, we got icebergs floating around. They're carrying boulders. They're dropping them on the shorelines. Yeah, we got it. We got standing water in the Wenatchee River area where the ice is coming down over Leavenworth. The ice is coming down the Ingalls drainage, and in purple, weird choice, but I guess it was my decision. We have standing water, and then these are all ice rafted erratics that got perched on the hillsides up above US 2 on both sides between Leavenworth and the city of Wenatchee. So you'll notice that this Missoula Floods story is all these dates that we have from the ash beds in the slackwater sediments and the measurement of surface exposure dates on boulders. Everything's younger than 25,000 years. So that's why the Missoula Flood story is conventionally told in all this carving and all this flood water is younger than 25,000 years. Move on, move on, move on. Here's a portrayal then from a recent paper by Richard Waite, trying to tell this story of an advancing Okanagan lobe getting further and further south and routing and then rerouting and then pushing the water again into different flood pathways across eastern Washington. But the point is, up to 100 floods are cruising through younger than 20,000 years ago. That is the topic today. The most popular way to tell the story about the Missoula floods. One source of water, everything younger than 20,000 years ago. And this is maybe one of the last slides I'll show you that I went with colored pencils back in 2018. I'm just trying to realize that the Columbia is getting pushed as the ice sheet advances and water's getting into different channels at different times. But again, the dates from Richard Waite, Andrea Balbus, who did some surface exposure dates, younger than 20,000. Uh-huh. 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 Oh, you want more? Maybe these are the only reason that you're interested in the Ice Age floods. The giant current ripples at West Bar. The giant current ripples at West Bar. This is in Kittitas County, the county that I live in. Crescent Bar's right across the river. And we now have surface exposure dates and other ways to interpret the batches of ripples from different ice age floods that came down the Columbia River. Okay, so there it is, coming full circle. You want those books? I highly recommend them. You want this website? It's free. It's available to anybody. Nothing has been added to that site in a few years, but it still is a valuable resource, I think, for those wanting to do that. Even the Ice Age blog, that's Tom going out and hiking by himself, and even the blog is worth your attention as he's learning some of this stuff for himself as an amateur, but taking these amazing photographs. He did a beautiful job of laying that all out. We miss you, Tom. Tom Foster. And one of his most famous, or one of my favorite photographs at sunset, I guess, I don't know, looking south in the Palouse River Canyon. Okay, we made it. I know that was more than 25 minutes, but what do you want? That's what I had in mind for today. If you joined us late and we have more than 1,000 watching live, let me say a couple quick things to reinforce what we were trying to do today. And then we'll go to some live Q&A, but we'll try. But I'm not even really sure how fruitful that's going to be because I'm just trying to set the tone today. But we'll do that. Oh, why not? Let's do the question thing now. Uppercase, please, if you're new to us, and I'll try to answer some of your questions. Reed's a farmer. Why don't they level up the loose hills in the Palouse somewhat? Why don't they level up the loose hills? I don't know. That sounds like a lot of work, Reed. I don't know what the payoff would be. You mean it would just be easier to run your combines through if it's nice and flat? I'm not a farmer. You probably have a better answer than I. But, yeah, those combines work on these crazy angles, and most of it's dryland wheat. So they're just working with the contours that they have. That's a crappy answer, but I tried. Uppercase for questions. I'll try my best to clarify what I know just off the top of my head of the Missoula floods based on books and other things that I've been sharing with you. Mike, how many years on average between the Missoula floods? Depends on who you talk to. You're saying 20 to 30 years between floods. I think the main message is if you're doing all your Missoula floods between 20,000 years ago and 13,000 years ago, you have some big floods, which means you might have centuries of quiet between floods. But I think pretty much everybody that's looked at those tiny fine scale beds are saying that the younger of the Missoula floods are smaller and therefore happen more frequently. And Atwater in the Sandpoil is like, he's got some tiny floods and there's just like 10 years between floods. So maybe just without knowing much more, maybe I'm visualizing Glacial Lake Missoula somehow does not fill to its brim each time. And if you don't fill to the brim, that means there's less time between floods. Mike, which ice advance caused the Missoula Lake formation? That's a question for the whole winter, Mike. Maybe some of you are going to come up with your open questions or new thoughts just organically today. I will be going into the older possible floods, Joe. That's the whole point of this winter's series. But I'm going to be very careful to save some of those study questions for us until Sunday. Does Randy have any stories about the floods? Thank you, Oscar. Randy Lewis is a local Native American. He's an elder in the Wenatchee-Piscosa tribe. And Randy does have some stories about the Ice Age floods and his people. And I haven't been able to get out with Randy. He's been so busy. That's good. He's healthy enough to be busy doing other things. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get out with him during this winter time. I can try. He has some stories. I don't know them. And I'm obviously not the person to tell them to you, even if I heard them. Troy, does Lake Chelan have any connection to the Ice Age floods? That can be on our list, Troy. I have the same question. The conventional story is no. Will you include Canadian floods? I see where you guys are going. All I can say is stay tuned. The answer is pretty much yes. We're going to be opening ourselves up to all sorts of possibilities in a positive way. How those huge tadpoles were made, hard rocks inside. Don't know what you're talking about. Oh, potholes. How are those hot? The idea is those potholes are drilled by the water itself. There are no grinding stones at the bottom that have been easily found. So it's just truly, and there's been plenty of work done on the Missoula floods with the amount of water, the speed of the water, all sorts of calculus and fluid hydraulics to talk about these swirling vortices that have a sucking power to pull basalt or pull columns out. Not my specialty, but that work has been done. And those potholes, even by the math people and the water people, can see that being a thing. Thank you. I've been wondering for a while if offshore ice sheet data had been located north in Canada. I would think this would affect the inland melts. Offshore ice sheet data. I don't know about finding evidence of the ice sheet going out onto the continental shelf, if that's what you're talking about. That's an interesting thought. We almost certainly will be trying to learn what we can from the deposits at the mouth of the Columbia that are underwater to see how much of the Missoula flood story is agreeing with that. So you're all wondering about the future of this series. You can ask what you like, I guess. Will I include Western Washington glacial story? Sure. Where'd those, you know what? This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. It doesn't have to be uppercase. We're not doing any more questions because I can see you're all looking ahead. Let's try this before we quit. What would you like to see in this series? I'll say again what we did today. We went through the Missoula Floods Story, hoping to introduce it to as many people as possible. Right now, let's spend a few moments. Can you type in, doesn't have to be uppercase, what you're hoping to learn this winter? And I guess if most of you are saying, I want to learn the basics, then that's going to be bad news for me because I don't want to talk about the basics. I want to learn new stuff too. You can say that, I guess, but Oscar wants to know the latest hypotheses. Rusty wants a timeline. Robert wants a Moses Cooley explanation. Adele wants to learn more about subglacial floods. Rachel wants Bretz's initial Spokane flood work. Ideas on glacial outwash. Now we're scrolling too fast. Everybody's typing in stuff. I'm going to really enjoy reading all these things. Everything, says one person. Age dating. The latest stuff, everything. I would like to learn what questions exist about the floods. Pre-Brett's flood research. Oh, interesting, Eric. We'll keep those things coming. I'll read them later. Thank you. We're going to close this session A by me saying one major thing. Of course, it's not going to be one. It'll be a few things. Thank you for being here, number one. I hope you find this to be a warm, welcoming place, regardless of your background, regardless of which country you're viewing from. So I hope this continues to be a positive place for you to stop, whether it's live or in replay. I don't know what we're doing with the alphabet, obviously. I know what we're doing on Sunday, roughly, and I'll put a little time into the episode between now and Sunday. I'm almost sure that we will devote a number of letters to the original work of J. Harlan Bretz. For those that are unaware, I've spent much of the summer reading Bretz's original work, something that is not done even by Ice Age floods geologists. Most of them that I've talked to said, yeah, I really should. I don't know. Isn't that stuff all old and out of date? I'm like, no, it's J. Harlan Bretz we're talking about. And like, it's 100 years old. Should I really read all that stuff? There's enough there that we're going to be doing a bunch of detailed reading of Bretz's papers. And I have an ask for you. This is how we'll finish. Especially those that have been watching all summer, you know that I've been leaning on the viewers more and more for help, just as we're learning things collectively. Here's an ask, and I need to ask it as carefully as I can. I need to track down some living descendants of J. Harlan Bretz. Can you help me? I don't have the skills. I don't have an Ancestry.com membership, and I think some of you have sent me Ancestry stuff already about Bretz, but I'm too cheap to buy the whatever. So there's a reason that I'm trying to find somebody from Bretz's family who's still living. And I guess I'll just be coy about that for now, but it's pretty important for some of my plans this winter that I need to connect with somebody in Bretz's family. And I'm prepared for a bunch of emails, and I hope you're prepared that if you send me a bunch of stuff, there's going to be too many emails for me to reply to each of you. So that's kind of, if you're new to me, I get a lot of emails, and I don't have the time these days to reply to everybody. So that's kind of our deal, that you might be able to help out with this. And you're literally giving me names and maybe towns, or I don't know what, ideally an email address from somebody. But I'm being careful because I don't really want to tell you exactly why I need the information. And I also don't want to violate anybody's privacy here. And so it's a pure intention for why I need to find somebody in Bretz's family. We'll just leave it at that. And that's enough for today. Our next session will be session B in this series called the Ice Age Floods A to Z. And session B will be when? This Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's November 12th, 2023. And our guest will be Jerome Lessman from Vancouver Island University. I understand these days and times don't work great for everybody. We all have different schedules. This works best for me. So this is what we're going to have to do. So every Thursday at noon Pacific, every Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific. And I'll see you next Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time, right here in the office. Here's to you and your health. Here's to the health of your parents and your grandparents, and the health of your children and your grandchildren. Here's the health of your friends and everyone in your community. We all need community these days. Here's to everybody in your community. And here's to this community that has been built from scratch by all of us. And to have everybody here back together with a bunch of new people is a thrill. So here's to all of us for being back together again. Last thing. Thank you to Buck in Cedar City, Utah, who emailed me this summer and said, Nick, I was in a secondhand antique store in Grants Pass, Oregon this summer, and I happened to see those bookends, A to Z. I bought them, and I don't think they should go on my shelf. I think they should go on your shelf because you do those A to Z series. So, Buck, thank you for sending me those very handsome bookends, and they will be featured prominently the entire winter, along with the autographed John Stockton basketball and the stuff that we've done together in past live streams from my home. And yes, the Zentnerds getting together at the Penrose Conference, and Cozy Fort by Steve sending the Serpentinite and the hammer, and Pat Miller from Yakima with the columns, and the hammer that I dropped and got rescued. That's over there in front of the Zentnerds photo and everything else. So thanks to all of you so much. I love you. And we'll see some of you Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Goodbye for now. See you Sunday. Thanks for joining us. Balloons.